Hello, Thrive Nation. Well, I've got an incredible guest. He's an international health hero. He calls himself an ingredientologist, which we want to unpack. He's known as the master formulator, I think, in the world. He's been dubbed the most incredible biochemist. He's got his master's degree in nutritional biochemistry. It's a privilege and an honor to have him on the Made to Thrive show. And he's part of the Biohacking Congress that we're going to be speaking about. That's happening on October 16 and 17. So welcome to the show, Shawn Wells.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to do this with you.
Absolutely. You've got an incredible quote on your website, Shawn, and I've been pondering about it because at Made to Thrive, we talk about people that have moved from pain to purpose. And you summarized it here. It says, I am strong because I have been weak. I am fearless because I have been afraid. And give us a short backstory. I want to try and squeeze every single minute out of the next hour from you. So let's take a little bit of a backstory of how you moved into health and wellness.
I grew up in a chaotic home and was bullied. I was extremely overweight, morbidly obese, very low self-esteem, suicidal thoughts and depression at a young age. I did well in school. I got into a good school for college to do business specialty school by the name of Babson. And I was pursuing my bachelor's degree in marketing and IT. And I ended up also working out about my sophomore year when creatine and whey protein and all these supplements were kind of hitting the market. Okay. And I got massive transformation. And I went to my doctor in between my sophomore and junior year and was telling him about all of my excitement about my transformation in my body and my health. And he ended up drawing out this lifeline. And I was 20 years old at the time. And, he drew 20 to 80 and said, why not be happy between here and here? And I was like, oh my God, I think he's telling me like that I can go chase my dreams, that as I was so excited about supplements, about working out, about the health shift that I just made, that I didn't just have to pursue business because everyone told me to pursue business. And so that changed everything from then on. Like then I started, working at GNCs and vitamin shops. And I had it in my head that I was going to figure out a way to get my master's at UNC-Chapel Hill in nutrition and biochemistry and become a registered dietitian as well. And I finished up my degree at Babson, and then I needed 2 straight years of sciences to even get into Chapel Hill.
Okay.
About 26 credit hours a semester of all these crazy science classes, organic chemistry, biochemistry, all this stuff. And I went to this guy at UNC Greensboro. My parents were down in North Carolina at the time, and I wanted to get into Chapel Hill. And so I was going to get my classes at UNC Greensboro. And he laughed at me. He laughed at my dream. He told me I'm a business student. I would fail and fail miserably. It's a ridiculous idea. And that night I almost killed myself and almost, took a full bottle of pills and drank myself to death. And I ended up obviously making it through that and deciding that I am going to be stronger because of this. I'm going to have resolve because of this. And I decided to go through, put everything on my credit card and do this in 2 years time or less with all of these crazy classes. I thought of this guy every single day with kind of hate in my heart, to be honest, at the time. I thought of what he said every time someone was like, hey, let's go out and party. Let's go out and, go to the mall. Let's go out and, have drinks at the bar and whatever. I was like, I got to study. I thought of that guy every day. So, I mean, there's people that can come into your path that a couple words can totally make your life and change your life, like it did mine, like with that doctor.
Yeah.
And then in this other case, I almost took my life, and he almost took my dream from me.
Yeah.
And so I've just been mindful of my words and how powerful they can be,
Mm.
impact that they can make on people
Yeah.
because of those two scenarios. And I ended up getting straight A's, getting into Chapel Hill, and going to my dream school, despite what that guy said. Don't let anyone discourage you from your dreams or try and take them away. And please don't do that to anyone else either. But that was the game changer. I got
Okay.
into Chapel Hill. I was on my way with my RD. The problem was I was still working like crazy. I was pursuing my dream, but I was, working 80 to 100 hours a week. I was working
Wow.
multiple jobs. I was, in school for my master's, and I still had like eating disorders. I actually went from being obese to being anorexic. I went from 300 pounds to 150 pounds and weighing myself every time I peed. And then at one point I was orthorexic, where I was working out all the time, 2 to 4 times a day. I was like eating 8 times a day and having to take all the supplements and being obsessed with it. And at no point happy with myself. And some of those things were carrying on, even though I was studying health and fitness and wellness and nutrition. And you see this a lot. You see, like in nutrition, a lot of eating disorders come into nutrition.
Mm.
I would say probably a third to half of the people that were in my program had some kind of disordered eating, which is something you need to be mindful of from
Yeah.
experts. Sometimes experts become experts because they're battling,
Yeah.
right? And I ended up getting Epstein-Barr virus, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome,
Sure.
Hashimoto's, and my whole immune system shut down about halfway through my master's program. I was in bed for about 6 months,
Wow.
and everything shifted then. And that's when I discovered the ketogenic diet. This is over 20 years ago. And I also started shifting my focus from sports nutrition supplementation to immune health and anti-aging. And then eventually I got my dream job after I was working like as a clinician for about 10 years as a chief clinical dietitian in hospitals and nursing homes. My dream was always to be this formulator.
Mm.
And I got my dream job with this company, Dymatize, where I was their director of R&D, formulating all the supplements. And here again, I was working 80 hours a week because it was my dream job, and they were trying to
Mm.
go to sale and get bought. And they eventually got bought by Post for 425 million.
Wow.
And then I got a brain tumor
Sure.
because again, I was just pushing too hard. And I ended up shifting like some of my, again, my supplementation focus now to like brain health and anti-aging. And when I was working clinically, I would, especially when I was in nursing homes, I was seeing a lot of Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, and, neurodegenerative diseases. And then I get a brain tumor. And it's like, now I was like looking into like the power of ketones with the brain and mitochondrial functionality. And so like my health and my mental well-being kept shifting, like my focuses in these different supplements. But over time, that was my evolution. And probably about a year and a half ago is when everything massively shifted for me. And that's when I did my first plant medicine journey and psilocybin mushrooms, and that changed everything. That's when I really felt love for the first time for myself. And I felt like I could truly give love to others, that I felt like I wasn't just locked on a path, like heads down, that I didn't need validation and to prove myself and get external validation to love myself.
Yeah.
I always felt like up until that point that I was like leveling up, but it was never good enough. I was always just trying to get to that next level, whatever that was. And so that was a even more massive shift. And that happened while I was writing my book, The Energy Formula. I ended up rewriting the whole book as a result. But those are some of the big hallmarks in my health and mindset that have happened. But I would say they were all important. But I'm really proud most recently of like, I finally learned to love myself and not want to just hack myself.
Yeah.
and just keep getting to the next level that I never actually get to.
Wow, what a story. And I want to deep dive into some of those areas. And I do want to sort of paint a picture just so you can start thinking about it. I want to talk about fasting. I think fasting and your fasting type, a nice little quiz on your website. Well done there. I want to talk about water, your hydrogen-rich water, your deuterium depleted water, those type of factors in water, salt, your Redmond salt, your Celtic salt, because I think that's important from a mineral perspective, Quinton, which I've been using every single day, and then move to supplementation and supplements, because I was on national TV on radio yesterday, and they asked me about supplementation, and I've been running a dispensary in my other life as a physician for 22 years, and I've got different brands that I think work well, and it's just been empirical evidence. Obviously, I look at the research and that, which is important, but I've got my own perspective. But you are the formulator, the international. So I'd like to get a perspective on supplementation, especially things like T-cream, theocrene that you, dynamine as well, L-beta that you speak about. I think that's sort of the framework if I'm just framing where we're at. But I do want to double click on self-worth and loving yourself and how important that is in terms of your purpose, because you can have incredible purpose and just drive and drive and drive and drive, which you did. I mean, one is not to discover your purpose. Secondly, to delight in your purpose, but then just know that you're accepted and that you're loved, and that we don't drive from that identity. Otherwise, if we keep on driving from performance and external validation, well, then we get into these trouble areas which you've gone through. So maybe you just want to, I think it's profound. Your story is profound. I think many people are going to think about it is you did this, this psilocybin, or I'm not sure if you looked at ayahuasca or you did ibogaine or where you went, or, LSD, but tell us a little bit about sort of the emotional and the cognitive parts of the ceremony, because I think it's definitely going to be a way of the future. It is happening here in South Africa, but where did the revelation of self-love and ability to love others and self-acceptance and self-worth, how was that part of the ceremony?
Yeah, and what was beautiful about when I did it and I went into this group is I didn't give my resume and all my credentials. And usually, like, I'm in these, rooms where you're trying to prove yourself and measure yourself and compare yourself. And then you have imposter syndrome and insecurity and all of these things. I was in this room of just beautiful people. I didn't know who they were. They didn't really know who I was. I was just invited to do this journey, and it was a little scary for me the first time. So they started me very slow. The facilitators were beyond brilliant. And they kind of kept easing me in. And I felt very comfortable. I felt safe. I felt like I could lean in. And so I, re-upped about 2 different times during the night. And I went from, feeling like a mild buzz to like feeling like love, and like I even like laid down in what they call like a cuddle puddle. It sounds like
Cuddle puddle.
to people on the outside looking in, they might think it's like a sexual thing, like that, like a group of adults might be on the floor on mattresses or whatever, just kind of laying there and even caressing each other. Some people that might freak them out, and you don't need to do this. Like, people are, some people go off into nature, some people are in their own room processing, some people are like listening to headphones, some people are just having conversations, some people are looking at the fire. You can just explore however you want to explore in these environments. For me, I was so without love for a lot of my life that this felt good to get touch and feel love, but it's more of like a childlike, your energy is much more childlike in this environment. It's not sexual at all. And that's not even tolerated at all. The facilitators wouldn't even allow that type of thing. So this is more like a childlike thing. And for me, like, that's when I felt that I didn't have to earn love. I didn't have to like buy my way into love. I didn't have to explain my way into love. I could just emanate love, be love, and people would love me back for that. And it's free and it's easy. And I feel like I spent all my life hard charging to like try and like get validated at some point, at some level. I would be high enough that I would get love. And here it
Wow.
is, like, I don't even have to work hard for it. It's there. I can just be it and get it. And that realization, that shift, like, people can tell you that stuff all day long,
Mm.
but it's the neuroplasticity that happens in the psilocybin state when you have elevated BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that's going to allow for your brain to hold on to that feeling, to anchor that.
Wow.
There's physiologic, psychosomatic anchors like that can happen, that will create folds in the brain and neurons that fire together, wire together. And so, like, it's in this neuroplastic state, like past traumas, past beliefs.
Mm.
It's been described by, like, Michael Pollan, that, like, if you imagine, like, skiing down a slope, and there's ski tracks, and you've always been going in those ski tracks, this psilocybin is like throwing fresh powder over the whole trail. And now you can blaze a new path and
Okay.
create new habits. And that's what's going to happen here. That's why, like, psilocybin, ketamine, MDMA, you're hearing about people, in 1 to 6 sessions with guided therapy in these compounds, have breakthroughs and never need medication, never need therapy for PTSD ever again.
Mm. Sure.
because they're rewiring their whole brain. The other thing that's happening is that you're dissolving the ego. The ego is often protecting you, like, as things come up, like, let's say if you're scared to get on stage, your ego is saying, like, what if you fail? Or this imposter syndrome, do you deserve to be here? It's trying to keep you safe, right? It's telling all these stories.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's preventing you. And it's preventing your authentic, your higher self, your higher truth.
Mm.
And there's a pain, there's a cost to suppressing your truth all of the time.
Yeah. Wow.
And in some ways we're a little safer from that,
Mm.
but in some ways it's preventing us. And when you're dissolving the ego with psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, things like that, you are allowing yourself to access your truth. And then you're in a situation where you see things so clearly. There's no story around it. There's no altered version. It's just the truth. It's just, this lights me up, this does not. What am I going to do about it? And that's what you're left with. And that's why, like, people are just, sitting there, like, eyes wide open, mouth agape, like, okay, I'm faced with my truth. What am I going to do next? And that's where it's powerful. That's where these things are really rewiring you.
So it's the product psilocybin, which is really, really important, from a brain-derived neurotropic factor. So you're obviously getting changes in sort of biochemistry and sort of physiological processes, as well as the facilitator, who the powder comes on through the psilocybin, but then the facilitator probably facilitates or asks questions so that you set up new tracks. And is that how you change your beliefs? The beliefs that have been ingrained from a sort of a neuroplasticity point of view, now you can change them. You can have neurogenesis and formulate new tracks.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And the facilitators that I work with, like, we had spent 2 hours talking about my past traumas, my mental and physical health states, injuries I've had, traumas I've been through. So they had a good idea of what could come up, but also a good idea of my ability to potentially lean into these plant medicines. So that's why they took me in slowly, and they were there to guide me. And one guy is a emergency room nurse in New York City for 25 years. The other one is a therapist, and so you just feel safe, and you feel like you can lean in, and you can, again, like, kind of go off by yourself. You can be in a group, like, whatever connects for you. And different journeys are different experiences. It's based on your needs at that time, your truth at that time, like what you're exploring. And we set intentions, and then we get facilitated, and then after we do integration work. And that integration work can be in the following days, weeks, months of that journey.
Brilliant.
Like, what are you going to do with that now that you've seen that and felt that?
Fantastic, Shawn. What a story. And I think that's going to reach out to a lot of people in Africa. And hopefully we can connect with some psilocybin experts maybe after the show and just see that we can have them on the podcast. But I do want to talk about my nutritional number one sort of tool, which is fasting. And I don't want to get into a carnivore, keto, vegan war here at all, because I think there are very specific reasons that people might adopt those from ethical, spiritual reasons. But tell us about your nutritional plan personally, how you incorporate fasting. I know you do that. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. You've got an incredible book called The Energy Formula, and we'll talk about the ingredients, those 6 ingredients. But fasting, who should do it, why they should do it. We've got a whole fasting sort of workshop that we run through, but I'd like to hear from you. I did have Victor Sagalovsky on the show, incredible podcast, talking about dry fasting, how important that is from a deuterium point of view. But give us the Shawn Wells rundown on his nutritional plan and his fasting protocol.
Yeah, fasting, it just depends on whether we're talking about intermittent fasting or extended fasting. Like you said, dry fasting, wet fasting. Some people do like a fat fast or an egg fast, or, you know, some of these kinds of concepts. So intermittent fasting is something that I do regularly. That's where, you know, you have time restricted feeding. You have a window in which you can eat. So, you know, I typically eat between like 10 and 6, like 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. I try and eat during that daylight window per Sachin Panda's data on circadian rhythm. I feel like that makes the most sense in terms of the endocrine cascade and, you know, just the neuroendocrine impact, like with neurotransmitters and just everything that happens with the sleep-wake cycle, the circadian rhythm. Everything is a waterfall, one thing affecting another thing, affecting another thing. That's the whole cascade idea. So it's really important that we maintain as much of a circadian rhythm as we can and not have disruptors to that. So I like eating during that daylight window. That's been important to me. And then extended fasts, you know, I do those probably once a month. I will do like a 3-day fast. And that is something where I typically don't do a dry fast. I understand that, but I think that's something that you need to work up to. You would have to kind of train your body with vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone to, you know, be optimal in that scenario. It's not something like with all these things, it's not ideal to just jump into them. Like if you've never done intermittent fasting, I recommend doing a 12 and 12, or I just recommend cutting out snacks. Start there. You know, don't just jump in and then get overwhelmed and say it doesn't work. You know, psychologically, that's not ideal. There's the idea of allostatic load, where it's essentially your stress bucket. And there's an ideal amount of stress that's called eustress, EU stress. And then there's a not ideal type of stress on the other side of that bell curve that's distress. And then there's the Goldilocks zone in the middle, where it's the ideal amount of stress and the ideal amount of adaptation. There's that idea called hormesis, where that ideal stress is causing ideal adaptation. But, you know, we can be overwhelmed. Our body, you know, it may become distress. Something that could be a eustress for some people could be a distress for others. Your allostatic load, your stress bucket might be too small right now, where it just quickly overflows. And you may have other things going on, where some things that may be positive stresses normally, like fasting, keto, red light, cold plunges, hot saunas, these could be positive stresses, hormetic stresses, sure. But if you just lost your job, if you have COVID, if you haven't been getting enough sleep, if you just got a divorce, they could end up being distresses. So, you know, be kind to your body and be kind to your mind, and like try and take on these things in steps. So that's where,
Absolutely.
doing like maybe starting with, hey, I'm going to get rid of snacks. Then I'm going to go to a 12 and 12. Then I'm going to do, a 14 and 10. Then I'm going to do a 16 and 8. Then maybe I do a 20 and 4 as far as like eating window and time restricted feeding. And then I'm going to do 24 hours of an extended fast. And, maybe I do every other day fasting, I try that. And then, then I do a 3-day fast. Then maybe I can explore wet fast and doing a dry fast, but it like I wouldn't just rush into these things. And it will help if you're fat adapted and you're ketogenically, at least like metabolically flexible. You don't need to be like a full ketogenic diet. But if you're metabolically flexible, it will most certainly make a transition into fasting a lot easier.
Fantastic. And I think at the Made to Thrive tribe here, we talk about being metabolically flexible, that you can actually, use free fatty acids and break them down and, produce ketones in the form of beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate. So I think it is a journey. It is to grade people into it. I think that's very, very important. I think, when you fast, you take minerals. I suggest people take salt, and I think that's important. And some athletes can be hyponatremic, or people that are keto, they can be hyponatremic. I think that's important. I recommend using sort of minerals and that electrolytes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I have on my Instagram at Shawn Wells, SHAWN. And then I think also on ShawnWells.com in my guides, I have a whole fasting guide with all the supplements you can take. Now, this is one of those things that, again, like people are like, supplements break your fast. And there's no rules. Like, please, if there's like, they talk about the keto police, the paleo police, the fasting police. If you're on these boards and people are discouraging you and they're saying you're doing it wrong, they're wrong. This is all about you exploring you and your health and what's best for you. There's bio-individuality. And there's also a lifetime that you can explore and do what feels right for you. If you come out on the other side of this and feel better and have a more innate sense of who you are internally and externally, that's powerful. That's what I feel like fasting is about. Like, people ask me, does it break the fast? Like, it's more important for you to explore resilient health. And there's no wrong answer. Like, you can always go back and do another fast the next day, or like in 2 weeks, or, it's whatever you want it to be. Like, sometimes, I tell someone, if having bone broth, like they're, bone broth's going to break my fast. And like, I get it. But if you have bone broth and then you go another 10 hours of fasting, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, I'm so happy for you. But like, a lot of people on Facebook groups and boards and whatever would tear this person down. It's just not right. So I do believe in I like using electrolytes. Like you said, hyponatremia is very common with the ketogenic diet, very common for athletes. To be salt or sodium phobic is kind of crazy. All the data is pointed the opposite direction, that sodium is associated with longevity and performance. There's numerous studies that show that at this point. So I'm definitely all for it. Getting enough salt, like Redmond real salt, Celtic salt, like you talked about. I love getting magnesium in. That's going to help you sleep. Some people when they're fasting have trouble sleeping. Some people might get cramps. The magnesium's great as well. I just take that as a capsule, like magnesium glycinate is a great form that's cheap. And yeah, you can get like the LMNT, or Redmond makes Real Light now, and it's got potassium and chloride and calcium in it. But really, the biggest things are just sodium, which you can get from your table salt, and then taking some magnesium capsules and you're good. Like, you don't really need to get hyper technical with these electrolyte drinks. Like, about 80% of what you're losing is sodium, and most people are magnesium deficient already. And so I feel like those are most important. And then you can play around with this idea of using exogenous ketones, with using C8-MCTs, dihydroberberine, which is a glucose disposal agent similar to berberine or metformin. Like you can play around with like elevating ketones and kind of getting in that deeper cognitive enhancement state, maybe where it drops your appetite further, like if you're really struggling with appetite. And you can play around with vinegar or, butyrate or some of these compounds. Like maybe you want to do like a detox, like with glutathione and, a liver health supplement that has a milk thistle or, whatever it is. Like there's no wrong thing here. And I don't really get caught up in breaking a fast or anything like that. Like there's a purity that can come from not having any food, not having any supplements. That's cool too. But also you can explore your body and just see like, how do I get fat adapted? You can do a fat fast where you only have fat. You can play around with a detoxing fast. You can play around with a fast where you enhance ketones more, like by using some of these supplements. So I'm wide open to the idea of many fasts.
Sure.
And even fasting from devices, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Fasting is more of a spiritual thing to me than the physical thing. Like it's a chance, it's a break from stuff, whatever that looks like.
And that happens with GI rest, gives your gut some time, and you get the autophagy happening. And then two strings I do want to pull on is number one, hormesis. I did have Seam Lunt on the podcast and talking about all these hormetic stresses. And then, well, what measurements are you going to use? Because I think you do the cold plunge, and we talk about infrared sauna that I'm a huge fan of. Exercise is a hormetic stress. Well, eating is a hormetic stress, and any stimulation on the body is some type of hormetic stress. Are you measuring with heart rate variability, or how are you deciding, hang on, I'm getting too much? I mean, we've got a beautiful 5-year-old, and she wasn't the greatest sleeper, and I'll check my Oura Ring data, and I'd look at my REM, and I'd look at my my deep sleep, and if I had a bad night, then I would limit the hormetic stresses. I wouldn't fast as long. Been fasting probably for 5 years, and it's been an incredible process. But how would you determine to say, hang on, the hormetic stresses that I've got in my life, whether they're emotional, whether they're mental, whether they're just stimulatory, when do you say, hang on, let me stop this hormetic stress in my life?
Number one, data is directional. I love HRV. It's a great measure to do exactly what you're talking about. It's one of our best measures to assess readiness to perform. Right? Readiness for your body to take on a challenge or a stressor. I love it. And you can get it with BioStrap, Oura Ring, Whoop. I think now even, I think I just saw the Samsung watch that they're coming out with can do it. So like, there's a lot of devices that do it. I'm not sure if Apple iWatch does it, but I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
So that's a great marker. But just like I've worked with people on the ketogenic diet, and they're like, my ketones just don't get high enough. And, the first thing I would say is, well, you're ketogenically adapted now. You're actually using those. No one's chasing like a 300 blood sugar, right? That's like glucogenically adapted, right? No, your body's getting more efficient at it. It's becoming more insulin sensitive. And so like, over time, you're actually going from like a fasting blood sugar of like 90 to 60 if you're like an athlete and you're eating like more like whole foods and you're having more complex carbohydrates and, you're not sedentary and you're fasting more, you're going to become more efficient with that blood glucose. It's the same with ketones. And to me, like this is true across the board. Like we can use epigenetics, we can use blood markers, but the most important factor for you is how do you feel? And you need to start using this directional information and connecting it between the two things, like saying, I tend to feel more energized and happy when my HRV is here, but don't let HRV take you from being happy to making you feel tired. This is super important.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like,
absolutely.
Don't let these numbers dictate how you feel.
Yeah.
connect how you feel to these numbers. Like that, it's a different thing. And so like I was saying with ketones, like as you get more adapted over time, those ketones are actually going to get lower. And it's helpful at the beginning, but
Yeah.
over time, I would ask, how do you feel? Then your ketones are good. If you feel energized, if your appetite's low, if you feel, happy, then your ketones are good. You're actually using them. Same with, any other measure. So I would throw that out there. But I do love HRV. That is helpful for me. I do look at that, and sometimes I'm shocked. Like when I overtrain, I don't even think of it as overtraining. I play like a lot of sand volleyball, and sometimes I'll be in a tournament for, 8 hours, and I think like it's exhausting but exhilarating.
Yeah.
But then I'll see my HRV be kind of tanked for like up to 3 days.
Yeah.
And so, it's the kind of thing where, okay, like it was fun and I really pushed myself, but I need to go easy for the next couple of days and do some self-care.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And self-care is really important, getting massages, taking walks, like just relaxing, taking a nap, like, there's things you can do that will enhance your recovery. It's not just, drinking like and watching TV and eating snacks. That's not the self-care I'm talking about. So there's ways that you can be healthy and still do self-care.
Cool.
Yeah, and with hormetic stress, you're right. Like there's so many great stressors. There's also the idea of like the brain as well, with like this is covered in my growth chapter in the energy formula, is that the obstacle's the way, like that stoic mindset. It's very similar to like allostatic load and hormesis physiologically. Is the more resilient your brain is, the more it can take on stress wise.
Yeah.
And it's just like how your body would work with this allostatic load. So someone that can deal with more mental stress also can deal with more physical stress, and vice versa. So doing that cold plunge will help when crazy stuff happens at work.
Yeah.
And being good at organization and, dealing with stress at work is going to help you do that cold plunge.
Got you. Got you. Let's pull on that other string now of ketones. I've been apprehensive to take exogenous ketones. It just hasn't sat with me. I've measured my ketones. We use CGM, continuous glucose monitor, here with myself and my clients. But once again, in the beginning, just to see what certain things do, kale, spinach, broccoli smoothies used to shoot my glucose up. It was a real problem. But so I've learned now, and we take our clients through that, how important CGM is. But obviously ketones, hearing Dom D'Agostino talking about actually breath ketones, acetoacetate, being more accurate than blood ketones because of the fact that people might exercise and their blood ketone levels drop down. So, and then the specificity of your acetoacetate and the breath ketones wasn't good. It wasn't accurate a while back, and I think the products have improved. But why are ketones so important for our brain? Do you think I should start exploring exogenous ketones? Because I've been apprehensive. I want my body to break down adipose tissue and break down these free fatty acids. I want to be metabolically flexible due to endogenous mechanisms. What do you think about ketones? Because I know there's a lot of research now happening with regards to exogenous ketones.
That's a great question. There was a lot covered there. I do agree with what you were saying about Dr. Dom D'Agostino with the accuracy of acetone, and now these new meters are just getting amazing. And I do love that, and I feel like there's a lot of error, like you said, with working out, and it was what I was really referring to before, is that you're utilizing the ketones so they're not hanging around in the blood. That said, so using exogenous ketones, I feel like they have a place. I see what you're talking about. It's the endogenous, exogenous argument, but ultimately you're talking about, I guess if you're trying to get fat adapted as quickly as possible, I can see where that would be a concern. But you're probably talking about like up to maybe an hour of impairment of when you're consuming these ketones. But what is not being considered is that you're upregulating MCT transporters the ability to take up these ketones because you're taking more, because your ketone levels are higher. So you're upregulating the MCT transporters. And that's going to happen with the exogenous ketone supplementation. Also, it has an anorectic effect. So you're decreasing your appetite because of the ketones. And so you're eating less. So you, in both of these cases, your artificial ketone supplementation may get you deeper into ketosis legitimately because you're not eating as much and you're upregulating these transporters. So it's not as cut and dry as like you're taking these exogenous ketones and you're just preventing endogenous ketosis. So that would be something that I would say. And if getting deeper and deeper into ketosis is important for you, like if you're someone that does struggle with getting into ketosis, this could help, like, for example, with cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, it's definitely something to explore. And if you're like dual fuel and you want to explore like just greater levels of performance as an athlete, I mean, there are some studies that show like 3 to 5% increased performance, which for an elite athlete is legitimate. So, you know, looking at ketones as an energetic source and a way to enhance performance might be something that could help. Lastly, I would say is like if you're someone that tends to reach for sodas and caffeine and whatever in the afternoon, you tend to want like a candy bar or snacks in the afternoon. Ketones could help one, you know, decrease that appetite for snacks, junk food, whatever, but also give you a lift that, you know, you don't need the caffeine cognitively, that, you know, that could help too. Like there's a few scenarios that I do like the ketones with.
Great. Let's move on to water. If you can just give us your short story on how important deuterium depleted water is. We're speaking to Victor Sagalowski and hopefully we're speaking to Robert Slovak about it, and how important hydrogen-rich water is. I know that Dr. McCullough speaks we've got hydrogen tablets here that we give to clients from an antioxidant point of view and how important that is because it's not a true antioxidant. But tell us a little bit about water, structured water, maybe your short story on that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, most of us, I think it's about, again, almost like the vitamin D and magnesium scenario where about 75% of the population is deficient. So this is one of these things where most people are dehydrated. So a big problem getting enough water in the first place, let alone talking about the right types of water. And then when people are drinking water, it will often have, you know, toxins, heavy metals, things like that in it. It's not filtered well. Then some people are getting filtered water, but then they're getting plastics and BPA and all these things leaching in. And then there's worse compounds than BPA that unfortunately, like in these BPA-free plastics, there's compounds that are xenoestrogens that are actually worse than the BPA, but everyone focused on BPA. So, you know, I would avoid plastics as much as possible. I would hydrate throughout the day. I would look to, you know, get sodium in, like we talked about, frequently throughout the day, like whether it's through the diet or, you know, using salt in your water or, you know, using an electrolyte powder, whatever it is. Then to your point, deuterium depleted water, super expensive at this point. I've actually worked on it. I have my partner in China, like he's got it at about half the price of like what most of the world market has right now and has really incredible equipment. So it's something that we've been exploring for about 5 years now. But it's a very involved process, very expensive. But the idea with deuterium is, you know, most of the Western diet is high in deuterium. Most of our water that isn't from like fresh springs is high in deuterium. Deuterium is basically like, if you think about it's heavy water, essentially, like it's the fat guy going through the turnstile, if you will, and it's kind of gumming up the works when it comes to the mitochondria. So, and this is cellular energy. So just a very, very, very small amount of deuterium. I mean, we're talking particles, like just a few, like, per million, can cause issues with your energy and your ability to have resilient and brilliant health. And it's really just been a factor more than, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, when we were eating whole foods, when we were getting fresh spring water or well water. Now that we're getting, this conditioned water or stuff in these plastic bottles, and we're eating Western diet stuff, we're getting a very high diet in deuterium. And deuterium is definitely anything that's mitochondrial dysfunction related is metabolic dysfunction, and therefore faster biological aging over chronological aging, and almost all disease states. And that's why you see cancer as a metabolic disease, but almost all diseases are metabolic diseases: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, coronary heart disease, PCOS. Like, you could just go through practically every disease. Maybe 1% of diseases actually have to do with, being genetic and what you're born with. Most diseases are related to metabolic dysfunction. So this is where, like, us being more mindful of healthier habits, yes, that would lower our deuterium, but two, potentially using deuterium depleted water, which right now is expensive, but we're exploring ways to try and lower the price of. And then lastly, like you talked about, hydrogen enriched water is kind of the opposite. So it's the whole point, like one of the points, I should say, of water and then this Krebs cycle is to allow for these hydrogen ions to do what they need to do, actually, in the electron transport chain. And having freed hydrogen is going to, enriched water is going to allow for more energy production with the mitochondria. Having more deuterium is going to be the opposite. It's this extra bound hydrogen, and it's the fat guy through the turnstile. Like I said, it's just blocking up things and preventing your mitochondria from even working correctly, let alone creating the hydrogen ions. So that's where it all becomes an issue. And that's where, like, avoiding deuterium, getting deuterium depleted water would be ideal. Having hydrogen enhanced water is ideal. So yes, I love all that.
Brilliant. Just two more areas. We talk about biohacking. Possibly give us your top 5 blood tests that you think, just labs. I've had a long discussion about ferritin for a long time with many practitioners. I just had Thomas Levy, the cardiologist, on, which is speaking about ferritin at a much lower level being healthy. Dr. McCullough has changed his stance on ferritin to a much lower level, going to give blood being very important. And I've seen a lot of patients over the time in my other life having way too low ferritin, and we give them iron and they do well, because it's a supplement people reach out into the pharmacies very easily and quickly, and having too high ferritin is a problem, having too low is a problem. So possibly give us maybe your top 5, top 6 blood tests that people should do or people should know about. At the end of the day, I always tell my community, doctor comes from the root Latin docere, which means teacher. We're here to teach people. Now, they're not going to become doctors, but what blood tests should they know about? And give us your perspective on ferritin. And then the last aspect is to talk about those 6 ingredients, to talk about T-cream, to talk about theocream, to talk about dynamine, L-bay, because I think that's important. I think that's very specific to your book, and I don't think many people out there know. I'm not very well versed in those ingredients. So let's start with the initial question.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting into my favorite blood test, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that hemoglobin A1C, CRP, I like oxidized LDL as well. Here's why I like those 3. Because in lieu of, there are some people I'm working with that are working on direct tests for the mitochondria. This one company called Mycon, I'm talking with, and they're developing some really cool technologies. But for now, very cheap tests can essentially give you a snapshot metabolically of how you're doing. CRP, C-reactive protein, is going to look at inflammation. Hemoglobin A1C is going to look at glycation. Yeah, there's other things that you can look at that are great too. But this is just a cheap and easy one. And then lastly, oxidized LDL can look at oxidation and oxidative stress. And between oxidation, inflammation, glycation, you have a good snapshot of like the problems that are happening as a result of metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction. So it's damage that's being created. And this is a clear snapshot of your metabolic or biological age over your chronological age, and your likelihood of getting a host of diseases as a result. If your CRP is low, if your hemoglobin A1C is low, and therefore your insulin's low, if your oxidized LDL is low, then those things are ideal in terms of your metabolism. Probably some of the other ones that I would look at, I do have interest in ferritin. I think that's definitely making a lot of sense. And to your point, there's actually a study that says that people that regularly give blood, I think it's twice a year, live about 2 years longer on average. So that's a massive difference, like almost mind-blowing difference. And then vitamin D, I feel like, is critical. It's more than a vitamin, it's a hormone, and it's part of the cascade and has everything to do with almost every system in your body. So I like looking at that. And then lastly, lipoprotein A for cardiovascular health. I don't like looking at cholesterol. I think those are, especially if you're just looking at LDL, HDL, and total cholesterol, those are not very accurate. If you want to do a deeper dive into the fractions, you can look at the NMR or a VAP test. But really, like, this one marker is an excellent judge of your cardiovascular fitness, is LPA, lipoprotein A. So those would be some of my top ones that I would suggest.
Brilliant. So let's look at ferritin. What level are we looking at? Because I think that's important. I've asked the vitamin D question as well. And, the ranges have changed here dramatically in South Africa. And generally, you try and keep my patients or my clients in 60 NGs per ml to about 80 NGs per ml. And ferritin as well. Give us a view there on men and women, because I think those numbers have dramatically dropped for a lot of functional medicine doctors. Tell us what your views just on those two before we move on to the ingredients.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Like, I love what you're talking about. I think that's highly ideal. But I agree with like the difference on men and women, that it definitely gets, men can certainly have higher levels of iron because we might eat more red meat. That's been shown. We don't like have a shedding like women have with their menstrual cycle. So we tend to have higher levels, and we tend to benefit more from what we were just talking about with giving blood, for example. And I know some people, even biohackers, actually do bloodletting, like in the shower, for example. That may sound extreme, but some people do that. And what's interesting is not only like to lower essentially iron levels or ferritin, transferritin, all that stuff, but it would also enhance like the growth factors and stem cells and blood turnover and some of these other things as well that are happening in your blood. So that's an interesting reason to do bloodletting, to do regular blood donation as well. So yeah.
Right.
I only have like a couple minutes.
Cool. So maybe give us the shortened version. Maybe we can have you on. Sorry, I know you got a hard end here. Theocrine, dynamine, T-crine, alpha GPC, and L-beta.
Yes. Okay, so really quick, and I do want to be back on. I'll
Okay.
do that. We'll do a deep dive on the ingredients.
Okay, maybe we do it. Yeah, let's do another show. Let's finish because I know Julia has been really good. The Biohacking Congress happening in October 16, 17. The Made to Thrive community is going to be getting a 50% discount on the online tickets with the coupon code Biohack50. Short and sweet. Why should people go and go to the Biohacking Congress live if they can in the US, because we're growing with our tribe there, but online here in South Africa and Africa, why should they go?
Oh, I mean, literally, I've done all the biohacking conferences. This one is absolutely one of my favorite. Like, they've been building out just some absolute rock stars there, like as far as speakers, super cutting edge. What I really like about it at this point is some of these other conferences I've been to are all about pushing products and have like a lot of corporate influence. This one has just some of my favorite speakers and just talking about the science. And so I love some of these conferences that are kind of more at their outset, the genesis, like where it's very pure and clean. And it feels like that right now, where it's just like, oh my gosh, I want to hear all these speakers, and it's not as corporate-y. So that's why I'm really excited about it. It's just a great community of people that, to your point about doctor, that like want to teach, literally want to teach people. So I'm really excited about that. Like, and it's in Miami, so I mean that's a fun city.
Yeah.
The weather will be great in October if you can come to it, but certainly, yeah, tune in if you're anywhere around the world.
Brilliant.
And last thing, finding me, ShawnWells.com.
Yes.
ShawnWells. I have an incredible newsletter. I have that fasting quiz that you talked about. Everything's free. I'm not selling anything on my site or my newsletter. I just go over the science, new studies. My Instagram at Shawn Wells is loaded with all these cool infographics where I break down like supplement stacks or circadian rhythm or some of the stuff we talked about. Make it
Brilliant.
super easy to understand at Shawn Wells. And then lastly, my book, The Energy Formula, just go to energyformula.com. You can read the first 2 chapters free, or listen to the first 2 chapters that I recorded on Audible. And I have a bunch of free stuff on energyformula.com with a fasting for energy guide, a hidden chapter on natural movement, recipe book, Q&As, like just tons of stuff. Again, all thrown in free. The only thing I sell on any of my platforms is my book, and I make about 50 cents from the book. So this is all just me wanting to help people.
Thank you. We'll put all those links in the show notes. We declare favor and blessing over you. Hopefully we can have you on pretty soon, but thank you so much for your time, and we'll reconnect. Shawn Wells, go and check him out. He's a hero, a health hero of note. Thanks so much, Shawn.